Welcome to the webinar on the UN Summit High-Level Week and also G20, including G7 and BRICS. My name is Anselmo Lee. I'm the one of the co-conveners of People's 20 and also the regional coordinator of the APS, the Asia Civil Society Partnership for Sustainable Development, SDG. This webinar is organized to review the outcome of the major global conferences, the UN part, the other one outside the UN, we call geopolitical summits, G20, G7, and BRICS. There are a lot of the changes, very interesting changes, which are the opportunity at the same time, the challenges to global civil society advocacy. So now we have a two-part. The first part is about UN High-Level Week. As you see in the program agenda, there are several meetings. First, UNHG Summit, UN General Assembly General Debate, Climate Action Summit, and high-level dialogue on financing for development. And also, very interestingly, preparatory ministerial meeting for Summit of the Future. So these are the main agenda. So we have invited several people who were in New York to attend all these meetings. So they will share their view and also introduce outcome of those meetings. That's the first part. And then second part is the G20, G7, the BRICS, not only this year, but also next year. So as you know, next year, we have Brazil, Italy, Russia. And so we are going to invite them to share their view about what happened and also what is going to happen the next year. Okay, without further ado, so let me invite the first speaker, the Ajay from India, who was in New York. Can you please share your view and then introduce the major outcome? You have about 5 to 7 minutes, okay?
Thank you. Thank you, Anselmo. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, colleagues, wherever you are. SDG Summit I will start with participation of the people or major groups as we call it. So we at the MGOs had been following with the PGA since last August, and that thankfully fructified in some participation with the efforts of Oli and Mabel and Rashima co-chairs, current co-chairs of the MGOs coordination mechanism. So each speaker's dialogue had one major group speaker, and that was good. But the mechanism that they created this time, that civil society participation and high-level summit was punctuated. This is not the spirit of civil society participation that we look forward to. So a completely mixed bag. Good that some of us could get in a high-level summit and could speak also. But just one speaker in one leader's dialogue, I don't think that's good enough. There could have been more people, more civil society organizations, even when the opportunity to speak was limited. People could have gone in, but that could not happen. So that is something that we at the MGOS needs to follow up with PGA and other officials. That's there. But in terms of what is the outcome of the summit, we are not so much enthusiastic about the outcome. Though it was good to see that Secretary General brought some urgency in his calls, and we appreciate that he called for resolution of some of the very critical issues, like SDG stimulus fund of 500 billions to be rolled out by next year, 2024, ODA 0.7% to be achieved by next year. He also asked the next meeting of IMF to be utilized as a platform to restructure debt, and also come up with concrete proposals on international financial architecture reforms. So these are the good calls and urgent ones. But I think that was not that urgency or that what do you call it, that that was not reflected in the speakers, especially heads of the state or heads of the government. It's now I find it very surprising that the means of implementation, which was SDG 17 was supposed to reflect, is completely out of the window. Nobody talks about means of implementation. SDG stimulus fund, people talk about, but means of implementation is not only finance, no? So we don't see means of implementation being in the conversation anywhere at all. And a lot of talks about partnership. Everybody talks about partnership, but this is very unfortunate that UN has not been able to analyze where we are going into partnership and what partnership is leading to. I mean, if you look at the SDGs partnership platform, 90% of the partnership is local and domestic in nature. And LICs, which need the resources, technology, skills most, feature in less than half of the partnerships in which high-income countries are involved. And they also have half number of partnerships, even domestic partnerships, as compared to high-income countries. So what does this mean? This means that partnerships are based more on ease of development rather than responding to the needs of the SDGs. This implies that the kind of partnership we imagine, multi-country, multi-sectoral partnership, is a myth, because very few of them are multi-country, multi-sectoral partnerships. This also means that partnerships are still being dominated by northern countries. And most importantly, this implies that these kind of partnerships are further accentuating the north-south divide rather than addressing it. So if there has to be a focus on the partnership, we need an assessment and factor in considerations which will ensure that these partnerships does not further increase the north-south divide. I mean, I can go on and on. There are similar things related to ODA. There are similar things related to partnerships in the climate. There are similar things related to in the realms of trade, etc., etc. But I will stop here. If there are questions, I'll be happy to answer. Thanks.
Yes. Okay, thank you, Ajay, for your overview. Can you give us very short comment about this political declaration adopted at this SG summit? As we know, there are a lot of controversy, and then the last minute negotiation. How do you see the final outcome of this negotiation, political declaration? Are you happy, or what are the major implications?
Not very happy. I mean, it shows the similar trends that we have been talking for the last 4 or 5 years. Past agreements reiterated, past commitments reaffirmed, and putting pious hope in the events in the future. Some of the things appeared in the political declaration in terms of ODA, in terms of reform in financial architecture, in terms of SDG stimulus. But on the whole, we were not very happy with the political declaration. The last minute controversy was that Russia, Belarus, and few more countries wrote a letter reportedly to the SG's office that don't try to create a pretense that political declaration is adopted by consensus. So I had hoped we were there. I was there in the closing adoption session, but nobody raised any objection then. So a lot of countries sort of had a sigh of relief that political declaration is adopted by consensus. But I think over the years, political declarations have lost their significance. And if you look at the review of SDGs last year, not last year, last time during 2019-20, lot of countries are saying that we should junk political declaration.
Mhm.
So you can understand it's to make it adopted by consensus, the
Mhm.
bar is being brought so low that nobody
Yeah,
bothers
that's
to
right.
give a damn on what the political declaration says. It doesn't have any implications anyways. But we would prefer it to be seen as an outcome of not only HLPF, but the entire cycle of the ECOSOC.
Yeah.
So it's important from that point of view. And we have been speaking to people that let's make it stronger, let's make it relevant, let's make it meaningful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you very much, Ajay, for let's go to the next speaker, the Mandeep Tivana from Civicus, who is working in New York. I'm sure that you have been monitoring what's happening inside the negotiation, and also how was the general atmosphere during this assembly and summit? You must have been very busy those days. The Mandeep, you have a floor, please.
Thank you, Anselmo, and warm hello to everyone who's on this call. So I'm going to speak on from the perspective of Civicus, as a global alliance committed to promoting civil society partnerships and participation as well as civic freedoms. So we went into the SDG summit and the General Assembly session with three key ideas. The first was that the SDGs are off track, just 30% of the goals have actually regressed or haven't moved from their 2015 baseline. And as the SG has said, just 15% of the goals seem to be on track. So we said that, the major reason for this is that 85% of the world's population live in countries with very serious civic space restrictions, according to the Civicus Monitor. And this is a major reason why the international community, why governments across the board cannot take advantage of civil society partnerships. Because as we know, civil society contributes to innovation in policy and decision-making, service delivery to the most excluded populations, and importantly, transparency, accountability, and participation. So our first message was that the goals are off track because of the very poor civic space conditions that we are seeing. And we are seeing very severe regressions since 2015, where we were able to win some commitments on access to information, fundamental freedoms, inclusive, participatory, and representative decision-making, as well as civil society partnerships. Our second message was that it's unacceptable in this 75th year of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights that human rights defenders should continue to be persecuted for uncovering high-level corruption, for uncovering serious human rights abuses, and for seeking social and transformative change in their societies. And the third message that we went in with was that we fully agree with the UN Secretary General's SDG stimulus plan. We believe that that it's very important to ensure that debt relief is provided, debt restructuring, debt cancellation is extremely important, particularly from countries from the global south that are facing the brunt of very high interest payments. However, the SDG stimulus plan should be accompanied by guarantees on civic freedoms, guarantees on civil society participation. Otherwise, the funds that will be freed up will be used to shore up repressive state apparatuses. They could be used to further strengthen networks of patronage, which are bedeviling progress on the SDGs. Now, I'm very happy that Ajay has already laid out his comments on the SDG summit, and they provide a very good overview of what there was that took place. Now, overall, if you look at the SDG summit, it's the halfway point of the SDGs. There was a lot of expectation there on the SDGs, but we found that leaders of big economies from China, UK, France, India did not turn up, where big financial commitments could have been made on achievement of the SDGs. However, 131 heads of state and government did turn up. So overall, the political declaration, as Ajay has clearly said, talks about platitudes. It has almost seems to have regurgitated old commitments. It talks in very broad terms without going into the specificities. But importantly, it does talk about a commitment to enhancing partnerships with all stakeholders, including civil society. It talks about reforming the international financial architecture, and it calls on all developed countries to contribute to 0.7% of their gross national income to ODA. Now, this is not something new. It's something that we've been speaking about and advocating for a very long time. Tellingly, despite our efforts, the political declaration does not mention civic space. It doesn't speak about the civic space emergency, the crisis, the challenges that civil society is facing around the world for speaking truth to power. There was also an expectation that governments would put up national commitments to contribute to the SDG stimulus plan. There's a website of the UN that talks about some of these commitments. That website, very few countries have actually put up national commitments, and it's not really clear whether these are new commitments or to enhance acceleration of the SDGs, or they are just a regurgitation of old commitments. So there's a little bit of a muddle and and not much progress there as far as that is concerned. And perhaps one reason for this is that a lot of the big powers were engaged in a lot of summitry before the General Assembly and the SDG summit, which should be a matter of concern. There was the BRICS summit, there was the G20 summit, there was the ASEAN summit, which some leaders sought to prioritize. And these decisions, ideally on economic issues and on social and political issues, should actually be happening at the UN rather than in the summits previously. So that's something for us to take away. But the UN Secretary General's remarks were quite supportive of civil society. In his opening comments, he talked about the role of civil society and activists in standing up against oppression, discrimination, and racism. So which is welcome. The reality, however, was that civil society access, as Ajay has already spoken about, participation was quite limited, as is the practice. The temporary passes were not issued throughout the month of September. So organizations in ECOSOC status could not bring their partners there because people tend to come there and wait for pass and access passes. Even the annual passes of NGOs, as is the practice, were basically did not allow access to the UN premises during the high-level week. So, which means that civil society lost an opportunity to actually engage with diplomats, with decision makers, with negotiators, with other stakeholders inside the UN's premises, where a lot of the conversations around the SDG summit is happening. There are certain groups who were able to get tickets, special tickets to special events, but again, those are not open to all of civil society. So, despite all the claims and all the commitment of civil society being equal partners in development and so on, this discriminatory mode of access remains a huge challenge for civil society to participate fully in UNGA. And perhaps in relation to this, one of the things that we've been pushing for through the Unmute Civil Society initiative, which several of us are involved in, and I see that Ollie is also here, the Action for Sustainable Development Coalition has taken forward, which urges the UN to make better use of ICT tools to enable better participation of civil society, to bridge the digital divide, to ensure more meaningful participation of civil society, including through sufficient time being given to contribute to outcome documents and so on. And importantly, to create a civil society day around the UN General Assembly and the HLPF, as well as there is a call for the appointment of a civil society envoy. Now, the appointment of a civil society envoy really is more along the lines of, the UN Youth Envoys, who opened up participation for a wide swath of youth at the UN and has done an excellent job on that in enabling civil society engagement with the UN. But also seeing that digital issues are a big priority. The UN Secretary General has appointed a tech envoy. The Secretary General has also spoken about the appointment of a envoy for future generations, which I think Jeff will probably speak about the Summit for the Future. And I see that he's on from the Coalition for the UN We Need. But we really believe that having a civil society envoy will help drive the UN's outreach to civil society who are not within the UN bubble, that don't have the cultural capital and the resources to engage the UN directly in New York. those who struggle to have the access to get inside the building and to, to engage in various meetings. We also believe that the appointment of such an envoy can help overcome some of the asymmetries that exist within the UN's offices and agencies. Some of them do very well, some of them do not so well in engaging civil society. And importantly, the envoy can be an important entry point, but not a bottleneck, not a gatekeeper for civil society, but more someone who's a champion for civil society within the UN system. So the issues of access and participation, and most importantly, impact that continue to constrain us as civil society in the UN system can be overcome in some way. But let me stop there, and thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Mandeep, for your very detailed explanation about key issues, especially CS Envoy and then Unmute campaign. Is it only in the room? Can I invite Oli first? Because you engage also the Global People's Assembly and SG Summit. Is it, Oli, are you able to speak now? Okay, then we'll move to the Jeffrey Huffines from Coalition for the UN We Need, the senior advisor. Jeff, could you please introduce the outcome of a very interesting meeting, the preparatory, I think it's a ministerial meeting, right? To prepare for Summit of the Future.
Yes.
Okay.
In fact, what I've done in Samo is I've also looked at the impact of the G20 outcomes on both the Summit of the Future ministerial meeting and also in terms of UNGA High Level Week and the general debate. And what I did is I reviewed the statements made at the general debate and ministerial meeting by countries chosen to host the G20 from 2022 to 2026. So you have Indonesia in 2022, India this year, Brazil next year, South Africa in 2025, and the United States in 2026. And what's interesting is that with the exception of South Africa, each national leader spoke to the importance of the G20 as a key forum where decisions were made for implementation by relevant UN bodies. So, I mean, this is something obviously that is of concern to many of us here in civil society. But, it's also, this is a great opportunity to look at the impact of the G7, G20, the BRICS on the UN, each of them as many-lateral instruments. And what's concerning is that they're becoming increasingly weaponized by the strategic competition between the great powers. So it's further fragmenting the multilateral system. At the preparatory ministerial meeting, there were nearly 150 ministers and representatives who spoke last Thursday. It was an opportunity for member states to set out their vision and priorities for the Summit of the Future following the adoption by the GA on the scope of the Summit of the Future, and to outline their expectations for outcomes based on the results of the SDG Summit. In terms of what can be achieved in 2024. The basic parameters of the consultations were based on the decision on the scope of the summit that outlined 5 baskets of issues, which include first, sustainable development and finance, second, international peace and security, including the new agenda for peace, third, science, technology, and innovation, and the Global Digital Compact. Next was youth and future generations, and then finally kind of a catch-all basket under transforming global governance. And so I'll share the recording of the ministerial meeting in the chat box, and together with links to all the statements. Now, what's interesting is so when you take a look at what the Minister for Foreign Affairs in Indonesia said. In the general debate, he spoke to the Bandung spirit, right, of the conference of 1955, that they brought to the G20 last year, and they, as well as the chair of ASEAN, and everywhere they go, including the GA. Now, India, they spoke about the outcomes of the G20, both in the general debate and at the ministerial meeting for the SOTF. And at the ministerial, India expressed confidence that the Summit of the Future will advance the concerns of the Global South as reflected in the G20 declaration. He welcomed the summit's aims to deliver a global digital compact to minimize the digital divide and called for UN Security Council reform stating that the architecture of global governance in 2025 for the future could not be written in ink from 1945. In his statement, it was interesting. In his statement, this is at the ministerial meeting, he covered the 5 key chapters identified for the scope of the future in terms of what the New Delhi Leaders Declaration delivers. So on chapter 1 on sustainable development and financing for development, he said we're looking at the ambitious Green Development Pact with an aim to double climate finance. On chapter 2 on international peace and security, it calls on all states to uphold principles of international law and respect for territorial integrity and sovereignty. Chapter 3 on science and technology and digital cooperation. G20 declaration visualizes a comprehensive framework for the development, deployment, and governance of systems of digital public infrastructure. On youth and future generations, it speaks to young people at the heart of the G20 agenda. And on transforming global governance, it spoke to the fact that the African Union was invited to become a member of the G20. So it's just interesting how they framed their contributions in the context of the GA. And in the general debate, the Minister for External Affairs of India also spoke to the contributions of the G20. Now, Brazil, President Lula, he also spoke to, he made reference to their being chair of the G20 next December. And he framed it as they would fight against inequalities in all its dimensions. And the motto of the G20 next year is building a just world and a sustainable planet. That as G20 chair, they will seek to coordinate social inclusion and fight against hunger, sustainable development, and the reform of global governance institutions. Now, as has been mentioned, the SG, in his opening remarks, he spoke to the need for greater trust and solidarity between peoples, countries, and governments. He warned that multipolarity without strong institutions to manage them would create serious risks that could result in even greater geostrategic tensions, chaotic competition, and further fragmentation. He commended the progress that has been made on many of the mandated OCA recommendations, including the establishment of a UN Youth Office, a new vision for the rule of law, the Global Accelerator on Jobs and Social Protection. And he also mentioned the plans for the proposed Open Biennial Summit between members of the G20, ECOSOC, the IFIs, and himself as SG. And of course, this is a source of controversy for many in civil society. So one question I would have is, will Brazil next year or South Africa in 2025 champion the biennial summit proposal during their presidencies? So that's just an open question. Of course, President Biden spoke quite a bit about the efforts of the United States to expand World Bank financing by 25 billion, to rally the major economies of the world to mobilize even more financing through the G20, the reform of the multilateral development banks, giving developing countries a stronger voice and representation at the IMF, and also, of course, welcoming the African Union as a permanent member of the G20. So all of this was of interest. So just in conclusion, so while the UN is the most universal multilateral body in the world, and therefore the most legitimate as we as civil society is concerned, we all know the UN rules of procedure have frozen in time a power dynamic that represents a bygone era of nearly 80 years ago. As already been mentioned, we have a Security Council paralyzed by the profound dysfunction of the P5. We have a General Assembly hamstrung by a norm of consensus that reinforces the lowest common denominator. We have Bretton Woods institutions in Washington that refuse to meaningfully include developing countries in decision-making. So no wonder that China is underwriting a BRICS development bank to kind of circumvent the Bretton Woods institutions entirely. So faced with the paralysis at the UN, we do see member states relying increasingly on more many-lateral frameworks like the G7, the G20, and now the BRICS. And so while it may be easy to lose sight of the UN's enduring value given this flurry of institutional competition. The fact is, and as we know, there's no other framework that enjoys the legitimacy conferred by the UN's legally binding charter, universal membership. It's very valuable work in specialized agencies and programs. So ultimately, a resilient and legitimate world order depends on universal institutions grounded in international law with standing technical capabilities. And so in a sense, this is where the promise of the Summit of the Future comes in. So, I'm hoping that we as civil society will seize the opportunity to help set the stage for transformational structural change in the year ahead, to inspire member states to make the tough decisions required on updating our international institutions. So,
Hey,
Anselmo.
thank you very much, Jeffrey. As usual, I think you made a very good, I think the report about what has been spoken at the general debate. I was, in the WhatsApp, I shared all the YouTube link of G20 countries, and the Biden, especially Lula speech was most interesting for me because he, gave us a lot of the important messages. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, out of G20 countries, the US, South Korea, Japan, Brazil, only head of state, right? The rest all the Minister of Foreign Affairs. I don't know why. Even India, India, the Modi didn't come to General Assembly, very strangely, Anyway,
Well,
so
I mean,
just
to say, Anselmo, I think this is where Mandeep's comment is indicative. I mean, when you have these heads of state who have engaged in summitries in the recent past, their attitude may be, why bother? I mean, I think it's also the sentiment of Russia and China in particular, that the UN is so dominated by the United States. Perhaps their sentiment is, why bother? So we need to really ask ourselves, is this a trend where real decisions are being made outside of the UN, then being brought into the UN by the great powers for implementation or strategic competition, as the case may be?
Okay, thank you for. Jeffrey, do you know? I put already question in the chat box whether there's any monitoring report about all the major speeches in terms of the future of the summit, SDG, G20. And the many others. I think it'll be good in terms of analysis for our future activity, because I was listening, not all, but the major. So if there's any, just please share, Okay, let's continue.
We'll do that. We have an information clearinghouse bulletin, and we're putting the finishing touches on a summary analysis of the ministerial meeting.
Oh, that would be great. Yeah. Okay, let's continue. Is Oli in the room now? He said he will be a bit late. And then Arjun in the room. Arjun was in New York attending this high-level dialogue on financing for development. Okay, then let me invite some who are in New York. I see the name Brenda. Is it Brenda from Oxfam who is working in New York? Could you also please share a little bit about your impression or your analysis of the outcome?
Hi, morning, everyone.
Okay.
I have been listening in, and I would say many of my reflections on what transpired have been outlined by Mandeep and also Jeff around the Summit of the Future. The only thing that I would perhaps add is my impressions around the Global People's Assembly. I was rather very impressed by not only the numbers of civil society colleagues that showed up for the Global People's Assembly, but also the diversity that was there in the room. I had a sense that many colleagues that were engaging were also not the ordinary CSOs that have been engaging the summit. As it appeared many times that, from the contributions that came from the floor, that people were engaging in the Anga itself for the first time, and some of them were also encountering the issues around the involvement of the UN as well as member states around the questions of SDGs for the first time, and aligning their work as well with the narrative of SDGs. Came out as if it was a little bit of a challenge for many of the CSO participants. I felt we have work to do. We have work to do in ensuring that we strengthen the work that's being done on the ground and making everyone understand how the policy questions and platforms are coming together. And that being the case, I think for me, this is why I showed up today. I feel the processes need to be aligned. We need to understand CSOs. As CSOs, we have very little resources, but I think we are also not adequately connecting and compared to member states. Member states are present when the G7 is happening, when the G20, some of them are, some are not, but still there's alignment that's happening. And in our case, I think we're working a lot in silos. So for me, the take home was mainly excitement around the diversity and mobilization, but also understanding that we still have more to do.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Brenda. Yeah. Okay, I will invite the Oli when he comes to the room, but let's move to the second part of our agenda. As I, in the chat box, I already shared in the beginning the compilation of all the outcome documents, including political declaration and speeches by UN Secretary General and chair summary of the future of the summit. So please refer to that compilation. So let's move to the second part. Now, outside the UN, as Jeff said, there are a lot of geopolitical meeting where important decisions are made. Maybe that's why they are less interested in the UN itself. But nevertheless, this geopolitical meeting also a lot of changes this year. The G20, Africa Union, and also BRICS. They have now the 6 more new the members. Let's begin to discuss one by one. The first, G20. Is it Vidya Dinker from India is in the room? I did not see her name. And then let's go to the Brazil now. Alexandra Nilo, now you have a lot in your plate, both G20 and also UN. Alexandra, could you please share your view about these two major outcomes, please? Unmute, please, unmute.
Yes, I was trying to deal with technology here. Thank you, Anselmo. I hope all of you are fine, colleagues. Well, okay, so let's pick up from India. I think we have, in terms of the G20, we have a lot of issues, of course, to follow up based on the results in India. And there is, of course, this entire tension in the air about what is the role of the G20 in particularly in considering the necessity of strengthening the multilateral organizations and the multilateral process. And I think this is the elephant in the room at this moment. As you can see, in the same way G20 is increasing the level of their power is coinciding with the decreasing in terms of the multilateral capacity to respond to the crisis. And G20 is really about financing. It's really about economics, or at least it should be really about that. But it's not becoming a place to discuss many other issues. And for us, it is very concerning. And it is also concerning because even being responsible or even being created to address financial crisis and economic questions, what we have seen is that G20 itself is not be able or capable to provide concrete responses to the means of implementations we need to move forward towards a real sustainable development process. So what we are trying to do is really to collaborate with everyone that is aiming to bring closer links between what has been discussed at the UN and what we need to address at the G20 process. At the UN, during this summit, the Women's Major Group put forward a very interesting also session on Saturday about financing and economic and, you know, the challenges we face. So we discussed a lot about civil society participation in decision-making process, financial architecture that aims economic justice with human rights and gender rights perspectives over the profit, an architecture that guarantee universal social protection, with systems where financial actors are accountable, because accountability is also a big issue on the room at this moment, the lack of accountability. We discussed also about financial architecture with democratic governance and how to invest in gender equality, health, and climate justice with this intersectional approach. We see that there will be a lot of contentious issues that will be again addressed during the presidency in Brazil. As it was already said, President Lula already announced his priorities for the G20, and they will be addressing poverty, hunger, and inequality, the adoptions of new protections for environment, promotion of change in the energy plants, fighting climate change, and reform this governance of financial systems. And they also mention about the UN structure and the Security Council. So none of these issues are easy issues for us, right? So they are in the core for the conversations, and we need to see how to address that in a very strategic way, without jeopardizing and trying to strengthen our key message that we would like to see a stronger multilateral system, instead of having these conversations moving forward in this parallel process. Having said that, for us in Brazil, we are moving forward in creating the structures to engage in the civil society actors. Again, I will share with you a link where you could include your name, organization, etc., because we are moving forward with the organizational process and the governance structure. We will announce next week the governance structure that we just agreed about yesterday. We will have the International Advisory Committee, which will be the body to think politically the process in terms of what will be our political approach, how we are going to move forward. This body will be composed by members that were engaged in the past in troikas and in past C20 presidencies. We also have an international steering group that will be basically composed by the members of the International Advisory Committee, plus the coordinators of the working groups. And all these working groups will be still defined, and they will, of course, address and relate to the issues that we just mentioned here. And we will have a very short time because we need to have our recommendations done by July. There will be a lot of emphasis in Brazil about better collaboration among the other engagement groups. And strategically, we need to strengthen this kind of initiative that is led by Anselmo at this moment, which is to try to share information among all of us and to try to combine all these movements, civil society in as much as possible in the same direction, because we also need to link with what is happening in G7 in Italy and C7 in Italy as well. We need to figure out the linkages with the BRICS. We need to figure out the linkages also and what would be the opportunities for us to do advocacy work when moving towards our regional process for SDGs, the SDGs regional forums that we still have in the first semester of the next year. And this is something that we also need to put on our radar. For the conversations that we have at this moment, we see that we need to find common ground to move forward with the G20 in Brazil, because none of these issues that we have been speaking about this morning or this evening for you will be really, we'll find solutions. So what we can do at this moment is to discuss how to strengthen our movements. There are many issues that could be interesting to have more opportunity to continue talking, and particularly about the key recommendations that we want to see coming out for the G20 in Brazil. We cannot forget that we still have the war going on. Having African Union becoming a member, it's very important, and I felt it was interesting to see the reference that South Africa didn't appraise G20 as this key place for having these conversations. As a colleague here mentioned, I think it's important. The issue of debt relief and reforming of international institutions, this is very important, because even the efforts to work together and bail them out, including by G20, have been very slow. I think you all are aware that they got some consensus in India about helping countries like Ghana, Zambia, and Ethiopia. But the main issues on the room is really the reforms of institutions like World Bank and IMF. They agree to consider major recommendations to reform the global institutions, but we need to discuss how. And I think it's also important to consider that we are moving towards the global the global conference on tax reform, which is something also very, very important for us in these conversations. Well, I think we have a lot of challenges ahead, but I don't see other way to navigate that is not, strengthening the dialogue among ourselves, among us as different players that are having different roles. As far as we have the website done and more information, the C20 in Brazil will call for an informative session to all of you, just for us to share with you where we are in terms of the preparations for beginning the C20 process. And this is going to happen still this year. For next year, we will have definitely official opportunity to deliver our recommendations to G20. It was something already agreed with the Brazilian government. So we are foresee that for the Brazilian process, we probably will have a much light process in terms of civil society participation and engagement in conversations with government. However, we need to come together with a strategy where we can do more advocacy work from the national level. we need to reinforce that, because all these conversations we are having at the global level, they need to have stronger pressure coming from the national level. This is not going to be solved at national level. We really need to have social movements pressuring those G20 countries at national level, so when they arrive to the global conversations, they will be more or less, capable, or they will have more, let's say, more pressure. Let's use this word, more pressure about how to change their positions here. And this is particularly important to have more emphasis from groups from North America, that I'm missing a lot, having more groups, US groups pressuring their own governments, and groups from Europe pressuring European Union for them to change their positions, because we know the names of countries that are blocking the position. So we need to have that in mind as well. And it's very hard to put the entire hope in the global process while pressures at the national level are not strong enough. We don't know yet what will be the role played by the African Union, but being from the South, I hope to see that as a positive outcome. I think we all saw the announcement from Mexico that Mexico now is joining G77, and Mexico will have a play to role, we hope, in this process, considering it is a country from Latin America, and that can have a role to play, also a stronger role to play at this G20. We saw with good eyes that Alicia Bárcenas is now the Minister of International Affairs in Mexico, and she's absolutely skilled in terms of issues of economic and financing. And I think I will stop here, and I don't know if I talk too much or not, but let me know if you have any questions or anything that I can, respond. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Alexandra. So congratulations again for the launching. You are now beginning to prepare for very important task for next year. I put in the chat box, Brazil is global spotlight. Next year, G20, if I'm not mistaken, 2025, COP, the climate, the conference, and also BRICS. So I call the triple summits, the big meetings. Is there any, it's all interrelated, So later, not now, but if you have time, maybe you can give what is the Brazilian government strategy, and also CSO, how you prepare all these three, one after another. And also I know Brazil is very much interested in the reform of the Security Council. Obviously, Brazil want to join, as a so-called the key player or permanent members. So this has also impact and implication for all these other meetings. So you will be invited once again to share your view about role of Brazil. As you know, also we will have the World Social Summit in February in Nepal. And then World Social, we all have a good memory of World Social Forum in the beginning of 2000 in Brazil. So together with the social movement, civil society, rural government, can you become more positive, the force in this very difficult political, the dynamics? Okay, this is the question in advance. Let's continue. Let me invite now, let's go to the G7. So we have Japan and Italy, the host country of 2023 and Jeff, you want to say now?
Yes, I think Jeffrey had.
Okay, Jeff, yes, please, now, very briefly, please.
No, I just wanted to really, appreciate Alessandra's plea for more participation from social movements in the United States and North America. But I will say one of the challenges we will be having in the year ahead, of course, is the U.S. presidential elections. And so, democracy is on the line in America, folks. I think we all know that. So anyway, we'll do our best.
Yeah, okay. So all the best. You have a big election next year. And also for North America, G7 2023 2026, I think Canada, and 2026 G20 US. So we all go to North America, Canada and the US. So this is going to be another opportunity and challenge. Let's continue. So now let me invite Aoi and Francisco, both 2023 and 2024 G7. Aoi, please.
Thank you, Anselmo. Hi, everyone. This is Aoi Horiuchi. I am a steering committee member of C7 this year. I'm a senior advocacy officer of Japan Asia Center for International Cooperations. So I will probably speaking about the reflections of our activities for the G7 summit, because almost all the activities for this year on G7 or C7 is done. And I was not in New York last week, so I not aware what happened on the ground in New York, but I hear some of the stories from my colleagues from Japan. For example, that for the political declarations, of course it was adopted, but I heard that it's still under discussions until the end of October. So we probably have several opportunities for engagement for the national government. Actually, early next month, I mean next week, we the Japanese civil society will have a conversation with Japan's MOFA on the political declarations and also the SDGs implementation plan at the national level. So I think those political declarations, although we are not fully satisfied with the outcome document, we can still have something to do with their own government. And as Mandeep rightly said, that participation of civil society for the ST summit is quite limited. For example, like seats for the major groups, including civil societies, are too small. And also, many official delegations from member states were absent during the general debate or the SDG summit. So we can see that so many vacant seats are all around. Also, many civil societies, especially Global South, they want to attend and they may want to have a conversation with member states, but that was not possible. So I think the way how civil societies and the major groups engage with SDG summit, the official UN meetings such as SDG summit or UNGA or HLPF should also be reconsidered. And in terms of the G7 and the G20 summit, the UN General Assembly is held between those two summits. But we do not have a clear division of labor over collaborations on the civil society side. For example, G7 is usually held in May or June, and G20 summit is usually held in November or December. So civil societies, especially in G7 countries and G20 countries, they have their own activities, but we do not have much clear strategies for collaborations. So we definitely need to have this. Especially almost all the important events about G7 are held in the first half of the year, including the C7 summit and the G7 leaders summit. So we need to think about how effectively we can use the rest of the year, the last half of the year, not only for handing over. Of course, actually, me and Francesco and the colleagues in Italy are actually discussing about how to smoothly handing over, but we also may be able to use this time, the second half of the year, for the G7 to strategize ourselves for the next presidency, or collaboration with other entities such as C20, UN General Assemblies, IMF, World Bank annual meetings, and the COP negotiations, and other forums. And finally, as Alessandra mentioned, that we need a strong social movement at the national level for a better consensus, or for a better political declaration, or for a better outcome document of each summit. but unfortunately, social movement in Japan is quite weak in terms of the SDGs implementation. So this is actually our homework towards the end of year and the next year for the G7 and G20 and UN meetings. Thanks. That is all from me at this moment.
Okay, thank you very much, Aoi. Very insightful comment. I put the one comment in the chat box. As you said, the sequence order of the global meetings. But very interestingly, G7 summit India was before UN General Assembly. But usually G7 summit, G20 is after UN General Assembly. So now the Brazil back to the past. That means, Alexandra, it will be November, right? The G20 summit in November. That's what we used to, right? But only exceptionally this year was September before UN General Assembly. The rest are same. Always we have a G7 first, May or June, and then usually BRICS summit July, August, and UN General Assembly, and then G20, and then COP, UN Climate Summit. And of course, in between we have a spring and autumn, World Bank, IMF. These are all the major sequence, So, but we have all different groups working on different agenda without being well connected, as Aoi pointed out, So I think also sequence order is very important because next year the outcome of General Assembly affect the G20. G20 will be the last big meeting, the General Geopolitical Summit. So I think we need to take that into account, as Aoi said, So when you make a plan for next year, thank you for raising that issue, Aoi. And then let's go to now the G7 2024 Italy. Francisco, you have a floor, please.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, okay.
Good. So actually the G7 is happening in June in Puglia, in the south of Italy, as you probably all know. And the Sherpa office is already working. And it's all organized, as far as I know, which is something quite rare for Italy, because in the previous presidency of the G7 and even the G20, the last one, the organization started really to get shaped by November or December. And I think that to have all the team organized in September, and the Sherpa office, actually the head of the Sherpa office is the same one of the same head of the Sherpa office during the G20 in 2021 under the Italian presidency. So this is creating a bit of continuity, even though the Sherpa himself is a new one. He started a year ago. But I would say that there is more hope to really try to interact. At least this is a perception that we have. The Meloni government is actually most probably having as priorities migration, Africa. They are the one that really insisted for the African Union to be at the G20. And I believe that they will probably have the African Union invited also at the G7. They want to launch a plan of action for Africa for development that is very much linked to the migration phenomenon. And I think that they will take advantage of this presidency also to try to boost these and to have other international actors to get involved in all this. Another priority that they are at least sharing at the moment, even though nothing is official, is climate and energy. And they most probably be focusing also on disarmament because of the war in Ukraine, and on pandemic preparedness, as far as I can imagine. On the different sectors and ministries, we still don't know. They're starting to get organized, and they will probably be starting their work more in January, at the beginning of the year. They are starting to decide the different ministerial, but nothing is official at the moment. I believe also what Alessandra was saying, that we will need a lot of work at the national level on the other G7 countries if we really want to influence this G7, and especially in US, because I mean, as far as I have seen in the past, the Italian government really is influenced very much by what is happening in US, and especially what the US government. But yes, this is more or less everything for the moment. We will probably have a kickoff meeting of the C7 in February, and then in May probably the C7 meeting in both in Rome, and they will probably be, especially the first one, the kickoff will probably be in remote also. What else? We are starting to decide the working groups of our engagement group, the C7, and probably we will add on top of what where the working groups for the G7 in Japan, we will probably add a working group on human mobility and migration. That's it for the moment. I don't know if Aoi, you have something to add on this, or Mauro, that is part of our group, and that I see him here, want to add something. We will have the handing over on the 21st of November, and we're hoping to have also the Sherpa at that meeting.
Okay, thank you very much, Francisco. Have you decided the date for your kickoff meeting, the C7?
No, and even February is not yet official, but we are intending to have it in February, and to have the C7 meeting in May.
The February. Okay, and also the Alexandra also, they are now considering, when to organize the kickoff meeting, the C20 and C7. I put in the chat box. There is also another international meeting, the World Social Forum Nepal, February, and we are planning to organize in Nepal, Kathmandu.
No, when is that? In February?
February. Sorry, 15 to 19. 15 to, sorry,
Okay.
so 15 to 19 of February. This website.
Okay.
So,
and Alessandra, have you decided already when in February you are having the kickoff meeting? No.
Not yet, not yet. That's why I want to make sure don't crash, don't overlap, so that there's a kind of coordination, So
Exactly.
ideally, you can have your own, Italy and Brazil. At the same time, this Kathmandu can be opportunity for us to meet together, to discuss joint strategy,
Yeah,
So
and
yes,
Anselmo,
please,
may I
Alexandra, yes, please.
very briefly, I think if you can organize this calendar among ourselves, will be key, because next week I will have a meeting with the Brazilian presidency exactly to ask about their own calendar. So based on that, we will decide ours. And I'm looking forward to have this calendar for everything put in place, and Selma. This will be very helpful. Thank you.
Okay, yeah. And also I put this date for the South Summit, the South Summit, G77, Uganda. That's a January, So I'm sure the many African CSO, they will be busy with this summit. So let's make sure that, we coordinate to make sure that we maximize and avoid, this overlapping. So I will update the info pack with all the fixed agenda and date, so that you can choose most relevant. But please remember, in advance, the World Social Summit in Kathmandu can be the common place for all. We meet together, including the BRICS. Okay, so let's move to the South Africa, the BRICS. The Simon Balakazi from South Africa. Could you please share your experience? You organize the civil...
Before we move on to the next agenda, we see Marvin is raising his hand.
Oh, I asked Marvin later after this intervention,
Okay.
After the the Simon, I will invite Marvin. Okay. So, Simon, can you please share your outcome of your meeting, the civil BRICS? Simon is a newcomer in this platform. Please introduce yourself. Is it? I saw his name in the beginning, but okay, I don't see it disappear. Okay, then let me invite Marvin to speak first while waiting for the Simon to come back. And also Nelia from Russia. Marvin, you have a floor, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. And quickly, this is Marvin Meyer from World Vision Germany. I have been working with the C7, C20 for many a year. This is with relation to the G7 next year. The German Chancellor invited the world to Hamburg to this first sustainability conference on June 20 and 21. So our guess is that the Germans would like to harvest those that are on their way to Puglia and maybe have a stopover in Hamburg. That's why we are guessing that the G7 could be happening maybe right after, but back to back with this Hamburg Sustainability Conference. Also, just noting for you guys to keep in the back of your heads, Germany together with Namibia is basically hosting, I don't know if this is the right UN term, but they are, I think, co-sponsoring the Summit of the Future as well. And as this Hamburg Sustainability Summit is actually organized by the Ministry of Development here in Germany, these are also possible linkages just to keep in our calendars. I put in the link to the sustainability conference in the chat. It's not much happening there, and it was really officially only mentioned at the beginning of UNGA. I thank you for your attention.
Okay, thank you, Marvin, for very, very useful information. I think, Jeffrey, you have something to say about this meeting, right? Jeff, please.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to make another possible conference, put it on our calendar, which is, we've been in consultation, C4UN and the Department of Global Communications has been in consultation for the last 6 months with the German Foreign Ministry to help support and finance a major UN CSO conference in Nairobi the first week of May that will focus on the Summit of the Future. And as Marwin mentioned, both Germany and Namibia are the co-facilitators, have been the co-facilitators for the Summit of the Future negotiations. It's very likely they will be reappointed to be co-facilitators for the negotiations of the Pact for the Future. One of the decision at the GA is that the PGA would appoint co-facilitators for the Pact for the Future by the end of October, as well as coordinators, 2 coordinators for each of the 5 chapters of the Pact for the Future. So that's going to be a major agenda item on the GA. But we have hesitated to really make a big deal out of this UN CSO conference in the first week of May because we're still waiting for final confirmation that the conference will be funded. But we do think it will happen. But just true to major donors, they take their time, making the final decisions. So put that on your calendar. First week of May in Nairobi.
Okay. First week of May, Nairobi CSO Future of the Summit, June 21, 2021, Hamburg, the governmental one, preparatory meeting. So I'll put in the calendar so that we can take into account, when you okay, now the Simon Villakazi from South Africa in the room. Simon, you have a floor, please. 5 to 7 minutes. Hello, Simon. Unmute, please. Hello, Simon. Can you hear me? I see your name in the screen. Hello, Simon. Oh, seems there's some technical problem. Hello, Simon. Okay, then the Nelia from Russia, she's also going to join very soon. And then Oli from Action for Sustainable Development. Are you in the room? Just let me know. As soon as you come in, you can speak. And then let's address some of the questions in the chat box. First, difficult question, Alexandra, for you. Role of Brazil, 2024-5. Do you have any idea how Brazilian government can play the leadership role, positive way, together with the civil society?
Yes, thank you, Anselmo. I think that we are not anticipating any trouble in terms of engagement with civil society. I think this will be something Brazil will be very careful about, and we have already established the channels for communication, etc. So this is not going to be our problem. Our problem will be to calibrate the expectations from the world in relation to Brazil with what will be the reality, because many of the things Brazil is always pledging at the international level, we need to do a better homework in order to maintain the credibility and to be a strong voice from the South. Issues around climate change measures, changing the paradigm of doing business or relation with oil companies, or many sectors there are polluting sectors that are not respecting human rights, etc., etc. So this will be very challenging for us, and particularly because Brazil is still using the model of structural adjustments. We are still kidnapped by consensus of Washington consensus, etc., etc. So there is a lot of differences about from what Brazil is saying internationally and what Brazil is implementing nationally. So we need to calibrate the expectations. On the other side, I think that we can find some areas to navigate. So I know Brazil is also very interested in moving forward conversations around health, climate change, and migration in an integrated way, as a way also to develop a kind of preparedness to address pandemics, and everything it's more or less on the same plate. I know Brazil will be strong in terms of challenging the balance of power in relation to the entire international cooperation system, financial architecture systems, and UN body. But we have seen that in the past. And again, what I think that could be useful is if ideally is to have a long-term plan, not long-term, but at least a plan from here to South Africa, to see how can we use the next 2 years, but at the same time to collaborate and define strategies about what we'd like to see coming out from Brazil in a more realistic way, considering all these events Brazil will be holding here, related to COP, related to BRICS, etc. And in the middle of that, we have all these global conversations and conferences. So I think we need to have a more structured plan for us, not getting so frustrated at the end of the process that because we will not achieve everything we want, but at the same time understanding the limits that we have at this moment. So I really would like to hear more from you in terms of your expectations and what you want to see included. I put in the chat a link where you could register so you can participate and be invited to any process we are going to develop in Brazil. Thank you,
Okay,
Anselmo.
tá bom, Alexandra. Okay, I'm learning the Portuguese, Brazilian Portuguese, pick up some the vocabulary. Okay, now Simon is ready. Simon, you have a floor now, please. If possible, you can open your camera and speak. I see your hands up, Simon. Simon or Simon?
Simon.
Okay, sorry. Okay, welcome, Simon. Yeah.
Hello, colleagues. This is Simon from South Africa. We are the current secretariat of the Civil BRICS Forum. Africa. I would just like to start by saying that the Civil BRICS.
Oh, sorry. Can you close the mic? We cannot hear you well.
Can't hear me. Oh, sorry for that.
Now it's better. Yeah.
It's better now. Thank you. We are coordinating the Civil BRICS Forum South Africa here at the Economic Justice Network in Cape Town. The Civil BRICS Forum is a combination of about 20 organizations that are working on issues of like.
It is impossible to hear.
Okay, sorry, Simon, can you try it's on and off your voice?
And off, oh, I think
now it's better, yeah.
Yes, it's our internet connection that is not
okay.
So, yeah, I think we have been active on these issues of BRICS, issues of
maybe with a new mic.
Yeah, maybe without mic, yeah, better.
Let me just switch off the video. I think
yeah, okay, switch off, yes. Okay, without camera, okay.
Yeah. So is it better now?
Yeah, it's okay, better, without camera.
Okay, thank you. So for us, we have been tracking the activities of the BRICS, and we are campaigning or we are advocating for the inclusion of civil society in these multilateral organization processes, because we are of the view that we need to be in platforms where they discuss issues even before they adopt the resolutions. We need to be able to make our input. As you may know, that South Africa is also trying to carry the aspirations of African countries into these multilateral forums. With that, it means that we are seeing what is wrong with these bodies, and we try to talk on behalf of Africans so that we all a better kind of arrangement in these forums. Because right now our worry has been that, you know, as Africa, we are just disadvantaged when it comes to these organizations. We are not getting a good deal in terms of the global geopolitics. So as South Africa, we are saying that we need to reform bodies like the Security Council and also others that are of importance to us as Africans. Also, we come into this with an understanding that we have massive levels of poverty in Africa. So many people are not enjoying the lives that they should be living because of poverty. There are many reasons we are having poverty, but some of them include that the international community has been taking advantage of Africa. Even our resources, we are not in control of them. I mean, the natural resources like minerals and also natural resources. So we have been pushing South Africa to push other countries to adopt a resolution on the track 3 mechanism. The track 3 is a process whereby civil society will be allowed to take part in the formal platforms and also will be included in decision making. So this is what we would like to do. But also, I think we need to take this fight to other forums and organizations as well, because they need to respect us as civil society. We have big role we can play in their discussions and in their processes. They shouldn't just see us as outsiders. They are representing voters of their countries. So we are the voters in many countries. We vote the governments that we mandate to represent us into these platforms. So our wish is that if we can be included and we can be resourced so that we can play our role. This is what we would like to put forward. So I think we can engage on other issues in terms of itself, but just using it as one of the work. Also, saying we are extending to the G20 as well, and all other bodies where South Africa is a member. So we are happy that we will be having the 20 summit, and also Russia will be having the BRICS summit next year. So we are looking forward to participating in all these platforms. And I just had colleagues making input on other platforms that we need to occupy. So I would just like to request that as Africans, we can be also included even in organizing these activities, because we have a big role to play in this political space. So yeah, I would like to stop at this point, and I'll be able to respond to questions.
Okay, Simon, thank you very much for your very useful input. While inviting the Nelia from Russia about the BRICS summit next year, and I put two questions in the chat box. So what is your view about the expansion of BRICS membership? We have two, and also the civic space in the CSO engagement mechanism with the BRICS. If you give some your view, it will be very, very helpful. Okay, let's go to Nelia. Okay, welcome. So yeah, it's a public holiday in Germany. Could you please share if there is any idea or plan for BRICS CSO engagement with the BRICS summit next year?
Yeah, are these questions also for me or just for Simon? Okay, so basically, first of all, apologies, I'm late because I'm still jet lagged. I was also at the SDG summit in New York, and also can share some views from that side. But since our last meeting, I cannot say that we did much progress. And of course, just for those again who maybe join in first time, Russia is hosting next year BRICS summit, which is already extended, as we know, the list of the countries. And of course, for us, it's a really difficult situation because lots of independent civil society representatives are in exile right now. I personally myself can speak freely here today because I am based in Germany already, even for longer period, not since the war. But for us, of course, it's a challenge how to engage in such processes, because we really still would like to engage in them. On one hand, it's really problematic to be open and honest at these events. Another point is that, of course, we understand that there are pro-governmental organizations that are actively engaged in these processes. And basically, our biggest challenge is right now how we can organize it either remotely or still somehow being presented in place, but do not feel the direct threat exactly, I don't know, after the event. So what we discovered so far, of course, as I already mentioned, there are and there will be some pro-governmental organizations involved in this process, but at the same time, we know that in the past, the government involved large NGOs into large known NGOs in these processes, like, I don't know, Transparency International or Greenpeace International, Greenpeace Russia, sorry. And but this year they are liquidated. Like they don't, for example, these two organizations simply do not exist. But we discussed it with colleagues who were engaged in these organizations, but still in Russia, but officially not representing these organizations anymore. They assume that it's probably still they will be in touch with experts, with usual experts, which are not already Greenpeace representatives, for example. And so this is the way we think it still somehow will be possible for us to engage through colleagues that still are not seen as direct danger for the regime. So, but yeah, unfortunately, this is now the situation. This is the only way we see basically how we can get engaged. And the second point, of course, we can try to, as previously discussed, try to organize something online and remotely. And another observation that colleagues shared with us, that usually Russia organizes everything last minute. So we can really imagine that the process will start like in spring or something like that, or even, I don't know, in the end of spring. And of course, everything can change by that time. We also need to live through the election, I'm sorry for this sign, of a president, which is happening in March. So I'm afraid that all governmental processes will be now oriented to this March procedure, and only after that we can actually expect that the government will start some kind of preparation for BRICS summit. And and if basically, and just if you allow me to reflect also on the situation with the new members and civic space. So yeah, we see kind of similar list. I'm just connecting now two dots, because when we were at SDG Summit in New York just the day before, probably you've seen the letter was circulated that 11 member states were not going to adopt the new Declaration on Sustainable Development. And it's kind of, I mean, it's not really a BRICS list, but there are some, definitely these new members among this list who basically didn't want to adopt the new declaration, and they demanded that there are no sanctions anymore, because this is what delays these countries from the sustainable development achievements. So that's why I think how I see it, that it's like new anti-Western, so to say, coalition. Yeah, I don't know if colleagues from Brazil and South Africa can reflect to that, because in India also, because yeah, I don't want to see BRICS this way, frankly speaking, but this is what we see is discussed around these new members, that like Russia is trying to be this anti-Western coalition. So, and of course we see challenges of shrinking space. They're really severe, and I don't know if we probably need to start with this BRICS summit some innovative, approaches how to engage, like collect already previous experiences from colleagues from civil society, where the civil space is shrinking, but also maybe even trying to find new ways how to engage in order, I don't know, at least, I mean, I'm not even talking about some impact, unfortunately, but at least raise the voice. So, yeah, I would stop here for now.
Okay, thank you very much, Nelia. I put a link about 11 countries you mentioned that raised about this political declaration. So let me invite, Jeff wants to speak, but before Jeff, I'd like to ask whether Kurt from Argentina, who has been working with us for many years, C7 and C20. Would you like to say something about Argentina? Argentina, one of the 6 countries that joined the BRICS. And also now, Argentina was the first country to host a G20 in Latin America. Would you like to say something?
Thank you very much, Anselmo. Well, I've heard this meeting. It's very interesting, and it's very good to have a closing meeting for this year, in which you know about all the different activities that have been held, and this was a very important year, really. Argentina is part of the G20, and it wasn't the first country. I'm sorry to correct you. The first country, I think it was in Mexico. There was a G20 years ago, no? But anyway, we had a quite successful, and I think it was one of the last more civilized meetings in the G20 in 2018 here in Argentina. After that, many political issues started growing everywhere and impacted more than ever before on the G20's work. No? We are here in Argentina surprised about this issue of becoming part of the BRICS. I think the BRICS enlargement has also has an intention also of a political intention more than a real how could we say this, more than a real joining a group that has a common interest. It was we are living a time where politics and economics have become the main issues that we have to treat. No, we are living a time where not only climate change but also wars and migrations have become the most important things that we have to deal with everywhere, and we are not till now taking those into the real account that have to be taken. I think that Italy, when they are putting in the G7 also migration as an engagement group, it's also because they are suffering mostly the migration that comes from Northern Africa. And beside that, I agree, and I think it's very important to have a group, even in civil society, that takes those things seriously. No, And wars, of course, Italy being part of Europe, we all know what's going on in Europe. No? But I think that the world is changing, and not for the West. Really, the world is changing for the worse, and we, as civil society activists, should take this into account and start thinking about that our voice has to be heard much stronger, because we are all peace-loving people, and we can't continue with the messages that we had years ago. Thank you very much for the opportunity of saying a few things that I'm thinking about the whole time, Anselmo. And well, I will continue working as always. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, group leader. So now let's go to the Simon, who wants to speak about 2 questions. Simon, please. And then we'll go to Jeff. Simon, now you can speak. Bilakazi. Or if not, let's go to the Jeffrey first.
Yeah,
Okay,
thank you, Anselmo. I just wanted to just reflect on Nelia's points regarding these new groups of countries emerging, and just to just to say that the negotiations related to the Summit of the Future will prove to be very contentious, because what's emerged out of that process is you have not only the G77, which of course has incredible standing and legitimacy within the UN system. But in addition, there's been a new group of like-minded countries led by Pakistan that has also emerged. So you have Algeria, Brazil, China, Cuba, Egypt, Eritrea, Saudi Arabia, Iran, Nigeria, Russia, Sri Lanka, Syria. They become a bloc. And then the most recent group that's emerged, I think, is out of this Russia initiative with the unilateral coercive measures. And this was at the ministerial meeting, a group of so-called friends of the UN Charter, which perhaps may be a bit of an oxymoron, but be that as it may, it's led by Venezuela, and I'll have to look at the other countries that are a part of it. But so you see the ascendancy. I mean, going back to Mandeep's point about the restriction of civil society around the world, you do see the ascendancy of what I would say would be authoritarian regimes who are grouping together. And then, of course, as was mentioned, you look at the countries that have been invited into the BRICS. They're not exactly, human rights loving. We would traditionally consider be democratic countries. So, I mean, this is a dynamic that is only going to be that we'll have to deal with in the year ahead, for sure, at the UN.
Okay, thank you very much, Jeffrey. Obviously, there are a lot of geopolitical, the games or power struggles among, all the major powers. So I think, as Nelia said, it's very important to maintain the civic space independence. At the same time, our own the position without falling into this the political, or ideological, whatever we call, So I think we need to have a really good strategy, how we can bring people's voice, maintain our independence, and also especially the civic space issues. So let's go to Simon. Simon, can you speak now? I see your hands up. Seems he has a... Okay, now while waiting for Simon, we have about 10 minutes left. Who has not spoken yet? I see some friends from Japan. If you were in New York, especially for SDG Summit, and then also the G20 or C20, and please feel free to share your comments before we close. Simon, you can speak anytime. If you are ready, just let me know. Just so you can speak. Anyone who engaged the World Social Summit, Nepal next year in the room? Arjun confirmed, but he seems he has some problem. Okay, if not, Paul. I see Paul from Kenya. Probably will be the last speaker, Paul. There are some questions about Africa, becoming member of G20, G77 summit, and also CSO meeting for the Summit of the Future. And also Africa Union organized the Africa Climate Summit, you know. So there are a lot of things are happening in Africa. I don't know whether our colleague CSO well prepared to meet all those challenges and opportunities. Paul, you have a floor now.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
those are too many items to say in 2 minutes. So allow me to just say 3 things. One is while everybody seems to be very excited about Africa coming into the G20 here in the whatever within the civil society, it is really nothing for us to be excited about. And there are 3 reasons around this. One is right now, many of you may not know, but the Africa Union is in the process of changing regulations to allow for only civil society that are registered with ECOSOC. ECOSOC is the Africa Union ECOSOC, to have any space for engagement with any organ of the Africa Union. It has not been passed yet, but it is a proposal that has already been put on the table. So it's extremely difficult. During the last Africa Climate Summit, Africa civil society were actually locked out, including the big African civil society that were part of organizing the meeting, including some that even funded some sections of the meeting. When it came to the main summit, they were not allowed into the room. They traveled from very many countries. So there seems to be a lot of excitement, but unfortunately, no. And I think the second thing that many of us need to know is there is a tendency for many of us who do not understand the Africa Union to think that it is structured the way the European Union is. So somehow there is an assumption that if the Africa Union is in the G20, then Africa voice is being heard. That is not how the Africa Union is structured. The Africa Union is typically, to almost a large extent, a puppet of Europe. 65% of its funding is by the EU. The bulk of the rest of the funding is by China. It has got a very tight control on the engagement of civil society, very, very tight. There is the civil society and diaspora, which allows for it. And I can see Brenda is here. Brenda worked with the Africa Union for a while she was at Oxfam, but also later on, so she probably knows. So while there could be some excitement, and it is good that maybe for once we are not on the menu, somebody's trying to take us to the table, but there will have to be considerable work that needs to be done for the Africa civil society to actually get engaged. But much more importantly, for the Africa to even go with one voice, because that has been the biggest challenge of Africa going with one voice. And I hope we are remembering that as we are inviting Africa Union, South Africa is already a member and has been a member for a while. And there is no clarity as to what that means in terms of the voice. If you look at BRICS, you will see that 2 countries from the continent have been brought in, that is Ethiopia and Egypt. And interestingly, these are the 2 countries that poses the greatest difficulty to civil society on the African continent. So let us wait and see. And it was very good to hear from, I'm trying to remember who he was, about the summit that is taking place, the UN summit. Would be glad to get much more information about the summit in Nairobi. Yes, Jeffrey, I can see your camera has come on. So we would be glad to get much more information, and we are not going to wait for May, because the African civil society waited hoping that they would be admitted into the Africa Climate Summit. Everything was ready. But when they arrived in Nairobi, they discovered that there were no badges for them. So we are not ready to wait until that time. If there's a way we can begin to get engaged, we will do so right now. But thank you all for the excitement. I hope that your excitement turns out positive.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much for very, very useful comments, especially the what's happening inside the African Union, which I did not know at all, 65% of funding from European Union for Africa. So there's a big question about autonomy and effectiveness of African Union. So let me see. Okay, now Jeffrey, very shortly before we are closing soon. Okay, Jeffrey, you have a floor briefly.
No, I was just saying kudos to Paul. We hear him loud and clear, and we certainly want African colleagues to be engaged in the summit process well before May. I mean, if the conference does take place, the conference preparations will begin in let's hope in October or November before so we have some proposals in place to have a very robust preparatory process leading to the conference in May. So let's just see if we get funded.
Yeah, okay, great. Okay, now before we close, I see the Brenda hands up. Oxfam, New York, but she used to work in Africa Union, right? Could you please briefly comment on Africa Union? Yes, please.
No, just 1 second to respond to Paul that I hear him, and I completely do hear him. And I think there's a lot that we need to do there. Yeah, and I'm happy to engage with him bilaterally and address some of the things that he's raised. I mean, it's true, the issues that he's raised around autonomy, it's a huge problem. But I think more than the European Union, the African Union, it's its member states. And I think it's the member states that we need to target in terms of access, in terms of strengthening ECOSOC. And with regards to ECOSOC, there's a lot of opportunities right now, with it now being moved to Zambia and a secretariat that's progressive. I think there's a lot that we can do in order to counter issues of accreditation, which are blocked by member states and not civil society. But let's have a conversation, because we need more energies like that coming out of the continent. I'm very excited, actually. I was thrilled to hear his voice and passion.
Yeah, okay, thank you very much once again. I have one last question for Francisco. Is the African Union invited G7 summit as a permanent guest? African Union?
It is the intention to invite, but I mean, we still don't know if they will do it, and we still don't know if the others will agree, actually.
I see. Because always, the G7 traditionally, the debt issues, Africa was one of the top agenda. So usually the Africa Union invited. That means G7 and G20 now as a full member. I don't know the BRICS. So very the changing dynamics, very interrelated. That's why I think it's good to know, how our CSO colleague, not only the Africa Union itself, but also part of G7 and G20, which is a little bit more complicated. But nevertheless, this is our common challenge. That's why we are doing this, the information sharing, to know what is happening, when and where, who is doing what, Okay, so without, unless there is other comments, I want to close the meeting. I want to thank all the speakers and participants. As I said, I will put all the information together in the info pack update I'll share with you, so that you can make a plan according to this the calendar, and hopefully and also we will organize probably next month another webinar to update each other. Okay, Aoi, you want to say anything before we close? It's okay? Yeah, so let's go to sleep. It's midnight. Korea Japan. Okay, thank you very much once again. Okay, bye-bye. Have a good day. Have a good day.